The release date for the Stellaris Aquatics Species Pack has been announced. That is going to be Monday the 22nd of November. And we've now got the patch notes for Aquatics and the 3.2 Herbert patch. This is Stellaris Dev Diary 233. Let's dive in. And if you enjoyed this video, please flood that like button. Alright, so there is a whole host of different things, different categories covered in these patch notes. Some of them we have seen some before. I have of course chaptered this video as always, so feel free to jump around to the bits you think you may or may not have seen, though there are a few sneaky pieces amongst every category. We are getting to see new features for Aquatics and the new Herbert patch. We're going to see the improvements, balance changes, stability and performance in changes, the UI changes, AI changes, modding changes, and finally bug fixes. Stick around for the category you want to see. Let's dive in. No pun intended. The first thing covered in this patch notes is the new features. For the Aquatics Species Pack, what are we getting? Well, you've probably already seen this, but let's just quickly go through it. We're getting a new aquatic pre-scripted empire in the game, a new phenotype that'll be aquatic with 16 new portraits, 15 normal and 1 robot of fishy looking aquatics. Added a new city set and room backdrop for this species pack. They've added a new bubbly ship set, that is the water-filled ships we've seen so much of. A new advisor voice, and I think I can confirm this is a pirate voice. They've added a new civic, the Angler's Civic, new species trait, aquatic, 2 new origins, Ocean Paradise and Here Be Dragons, and the new Ascension perk, Hydrocentric. For the humanoid species pack, we're also getting some features. They've added the new civic Pompous Purists. And then we've also got some features coming in with the free 3.2 Herbert patch, courtesy of the Custodians team. What will that include? Well, multiplayer hosts that own the DLCs now unlock portraits as well as ship and background sets from the plantoids and humanoid species packs for clients that do not own them. Well, what does that mean? Well, in the game at the moment, like almost all Paradox games that I know of, if you play multiplayer, the host's DLCs are the only DLCs that matter. If the host owns all the DLCs, you will have access to that content if you join their game. However, that wasn't true of species packs. They did not used to be shareable. They've also added the ability to pick your main species' gender during game setup. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but I think it means we can now have individual species of only a single gender. That's awesome. We can now have mono-gendered species, I believe, so anyone that wants to recreate, for instance, the Asari from Mass Effect, you are good to go. They've added over 200 new star names in the random galaxy generation, that's cool. 13 new random events for terraforming to make the feature even more engaging. 4 new asteroid-related anomalies to spice up old anomaly categories. 4 new gas giant anomalies, and 4 new anomalies to existing uninhabitable world anomaly categories. From my point of view, that's absolutely fantastic. I love extra content like that. They've also added new options to several old anomaly events which share categories with the newly added ones above. That's something we've been dying out for. I am sick to death of finding the same anomalies and getting the same outputs from them. They've also enabled the ship browser for all players. Some of you have already had this up until now, but now everyone should have it. What are the improvements we're going to be getting? Well, this one is going to be a big boon for some of you. I know a lot of people have really hated this feature that has been in the game for a while. Reinforcement fleets will now attempt to find a safe but longer path if the shortest path to the target fleet is not considered safe. This will then reduce how often reinforcement fleets are spawned at the shipyard at the cost of increasing the missing in action time due to taking a longer path in these cases. Hopefully, this is now going to reduce the issue that many people have got where we've had individual fleets kind of caught up in combat, individual ships as they attempt to reinforce, and you end up with a spam of one ship in a fleet, and that completely is it's a complete pain actually to try and reorganize all those ships. They've also made reinforcement fleets now consider systems that have both hostiles and allies in them to be safe for pathfinding purposes. That's going to be interesting. Let's see how that plays out. Reinforcing fleets using jump drives no longer require a safe hyperlane path to the fleet they are reinforcing. That's actually really awesome. That means that they will go missing in action, I believe, and then turn up, hopefully without the jump drive negative modifier, but it does kind of make some thematic sense. We'll have to see how that plays out. They've improved how shipyards are selected when constructing reinforcements to better utilize stations with multiple shipyards and mega shipyards. People have been crying out for that for a while, so hopefully we'll see how that goes. And something else they've done, they've now set it so that reinforcing fleets that fail to find a safe path to the target fleet will now merge with other fleets orbiting the same shipyard. If both fleets intended to reinforce the same target fleet, that should hopefully completely, finally do away with all of those individual ships we would have scattered throughout our space. A complete nightmare, let me tell you. I hope this is also true for ships we have in federations when they're going to reinforce. We will have to see though, but this is definitely something people in the community have been asking for. It is fantastic to see the custodians hopefully deliver on a request of this magnitude. Additionally, plantoids and fungoids are no longer forced to have no gender. You can freely pick species' gender. Instead, every randomly generated species now has a 30% chance of being either genderless, female only, or male only. They've added an additional option to the Alien Box event chain if you are a Gestalt. They've also added an industrial colony designation to Ecumenopolis, that's cool, and they've made it so colony events will not fire on newly terraformed worlds to avoid some ludonarrative dissonance. Okay, the default flag of New Empires is also now randomized. Say goodbye to the red-black triangle flag. Okay, that's pretty cool as well. Some great improvements there, but what are they doing about balance? Well, there's a whole host of changes coming in. So, functional architecture and constructobots completely overpowered in the current meta, as it was granting 2 free building slots. That's now been nerfed back down to 1, though I believe they are keeping the minus 15% building cost reduction and district cost reduction, so that is something. It's still going to be powerful, but it's not going to be an auto-include for most empires. Agrarian idle empires now get 1 planet building slot per every 4 agricultural district built. That's pretty good. They've also reduced the ship upkeep cost modifier for the Clone Army Origin Admiral variants down to 5, 10 and 20% respectively. Whilst I'm glad to see Clone Army getting a nerf, the nerf I'm hoping that they get is actually more along the lines of a reduction in their ludicrous and phenomenal pop growth speed in the early game. The ruins of Shalash archaeology site no longer has a chance of giving quite as much unity as defeating the endgame crisis. You can no longer use planet killer weapons on primitives inside your borders without the appropriate primitive interference policy. Pops working the livestock job now have a 10% less political power. A lot of anomalies were rewarding 3 society research, they've done away with that. Awakened empires may now use traditions, that's pretty scary. Several productivity improving technologies no longer have dubious benefits. Their upkeep production effects now only apply to jobs actually primarily producing resources. Nerve stapled hive mind pops can no longer perform complex drone jobs. They've reduced the amount of jobs added by the leisure archaeology districts to bring them in line with the other Ecumenopolis districts. I believe that's 6 jobs now then. Ion cannons are no longer free to maintain. They now cost 8 energy. That is quite a nerf. And then there's a whole bunch of changes to necro hives. They've cut the necrophage pop assembly penalty to 50% from 75%. They have made pop output modifiers, both positive and negative, no longer apply to hive minds. They've made the minus 50% organic upkeep also apply to energy for photosynthesis, and devouring swarm necrophages now spawn with extra infrastructure to account for the lack of any chambers of elevation. Finally, life seeded now start with a size 30 planet. That is pretty interesting here. That brings it more in line with what we are believing that the hydrocentric origin is going to be delivering. Alright, so we have seen most of those balance changes covered already in previous developer diaries. But what about stability and performance? Well, the first line here is going to be quite interesting because they have acknowledged one of the biggest and best overhaul mods or extension mods to Stellaris. That is the Megastructures mod. And why have they acknowledged that? What have they said? Well, they have fixed an OOS issue caused by using button effects in custom mod UI. This now means you can go back to building that Nicole Dyson beam to ensure galactic peace and prosperity. Many users are going to be fantastically happy with that one, I can imagine. They've improved the performance of pop factions, updating their support values, as there was an issue before where they would calculate every single faction in the Empire rather than just calculating once for the whole Empire and referring to that value for each faction. That's good. They've improved the performance of planet resource compare triggers and cut down on their use a bit, and it's still quite expensive though. They've improved the performance of a variety of checks by making more extensive use of species happiness caching. They've cached calculations of pop has random ethics to reduce performance impact of repeatedly checking it by about 50%. That is a massive saving. They have optimized rising unemployment events triggers to only 15% as costly, so they've reduced 85% of the cost there. Also, the game will no longer be constantly trying and failing to run the Grey Goo event True Masters on every planet every day. That was a massive oversight in my personal opinion, but I'm glad they finally caught that one. They have optimized the checks for whether a pop can belong to a certain faction by pre-filtering pops by ethics in code rather than running the script checks on all pops. For modders, this will now mean that a faction will only allow pops which match its guiding ethic in it unless use guiding ethic as pop filter equals no is specified. That's something that will definitely be important to modders. Optimized several expensive pop faction demands that were checking all pops instead of all species and similar. They've improved the efficiency of checking whether a pop faction should exist, and they've optimized checks for jobs possible trigger so that the four most common triggers are now pre-calculated per pop rather than repeatedly for each job that a pop can take. The format does look a bit different now with possible pre-calc, so modders will need to update a bit here. The error log will though warn you in most cases, except you also need to add a check when you use complex specialist job check trigger. Alright, that's a whole host of stability and performance changes. A lot of those are helpful for modders, a lot of those are helpful for vanilla players. Great to see the custodians at work. Wow, we are really blitzing through this dev diary. Alright, the UI, what's going on there? Well, the music player control bar now starts hidden and can be extended by clicking the music icon. I actually don't like that, to be quite honest. I like how it's always out there. I sometimes forget to click it in my live streams and people are rewarded with having no music and just the dulcet tones of my voice, which I do have to apologize for when that does happen. So actually I'm somewhat not in favor of this one, but I can imagine some people are preferential to this. The title of the music player is now localized, that's good. Pop strata icons no longer overlap in the Living Standards tooltips. I hadn't noticed they were doing that, but I'm glad they're not. Tab key in console now also adds list commands containing entered text. That's really good actually. Wow, as someone who uses console commands quite a lot for some of my testing, I'm looking forward to be able to use that. Many in-game UIs have been updated to scale vertically with increased game resolutions. That's pretty cool. They've disabled the delete and update template buttons when editing a base species template. That's probably quite useful. I can imagine there are many times you make a mistake in this game and it is good when they don't allow you to do something blatantly stupid like that. All languages now list the main menu's hotkeys, and they've added a description to how migration works to the Transit Hub Starbase building. That's actually very useful. I know that many people are a little bit confused or have been confused with transit hubs and whether that means that pops are more likely to emigrate to that system or immigrate to that system or more likely to emigrate from that system. And now we've got the AI changes. They talked about in quite a lot of dev diaries making some really good changes to the AI, so the AI will now have a functioning economy during the game. What have they done though? Let's have a read of what they are saying is going to be happening with the new Herbert patch. They've improved the AI algorithm for picking which building and district to build by fixing an issue where it would not handle buildings or districts which produced multiple resources very well. That's good. They've improved AI logic for building starbase modules and buildings. It will no longer spam crew quarters everywhere and will instead be better at building useful things like resource producing buildings and Titan assembly yards. That's very great. Now, there's a whole bunch of changes to starbases. Let's blitz through them. The AI can now build ice mining stations if it's hydrocentric. They can build dragon hatcheries if it's got the technology. What on earth is dragon hatcheries? Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hold the phone, everybody. I'm assuming that's coming with the origin, with the dragon origin, but wow, we're getting a dragon hatcheries building on starbases. Okay, that's pretty cool. AI is now building less crew quarters in general, and in places where it doesn't make sense, it won't build them. It's building a lot more anchorages. That will increase its naval cap. Good to see. The AI is building a bit more solar arrays if it is a Gestalt. That is also good. Solar arrays are fantastic. I can always recommend building them if you have the option on your star bases. They can really help pump up your economy. The AI will also now build hydroponics, since that has been buffed a whole lot and it is way more useful to the economy. I can also confirm that I would recommend in the early game building hydroponics bays on every starbase you have. Use them to actually balance your food output. Do not build agriculture jobs where it is not necessary. The AI will now handle starbases after taking over from a player, but it will not build lots of defense modules everywhere and tank the economy that way. That's good to see. What else is happening? The AI empires are now more careful about running out of food. Rogue Servitor AI and player default is now to give their bio trophies migration rights rather than to not do so. That's very useful. I've noticed that many Rogue Servitors do not have their bio trophies on any planet except their capital when it is run by an AI, and that's a little bit stupid. So it's good to see that they're doing that. The AI is now able to create ecumenopolises. I think it's ecumenopoli, but correct me if I'm wrong here, folks. I think it should be ecumenopoli, but that's a really good thing to see. Absolutely fantastic. The AI is now better able to budget for repairing the shattered ring world that Shattered Ring Origin empires start with. That I can imagine would be quite difficult to do. The AI is now better able to budget for terraforming and will now more readily terraform planets into classes which are ideal for them. Yes, this is something we've heard about before. We have seen in the past the AI were completely useless at terraforming. That should not be the case for much longer, and I cannot wait to see those little blue icons appearing across the galaxy. They have fixed the AI sending small fleets to attack starbases without grouping up. They have fixed AI trying to build starbase buildings and modules it wasn't allowed to be building in certain cases. They have improved the AI weight for planet killer weapons, so they will tend to pick the one that benefits them the most. This also applies to the player's auto-generated ship designs. Well, let's see if they've got better auto-generated ship designs. I think the jury is going to be out for a long time on them getting auto-generated ship designs that are optimum, but we will have to see. The AI now will consider anti-crime campaigns as a valid way of fighting crime, but it will also occasionally make deals with crime lords if it is the victim of a criminal syndicate. Good to see. They have fixed an issue where AI empires would leave fleets behind in other space after peace was concluded. Yeah, that was really weird. You had these neutral fleets just scattered throughout your space, kind of doing absolutely nothing. Good to see they've changed that up. And overall, here's some absolutely fantastic changes to the AI. I am somewhat possibly scared of what we could be seeing from a Grand Admiral no scaling AI, which is able to build buildings correctly. Those massive modifiers they get are going to be very, very scary indeed. There's also a bunch of modding features that have changed, as well as some bug fixes. I'm not going to cover those. There's an extensive list. If you want to see them, go and read the developer diaries, though there is a single thing in the bug fixes I am going to cover because I think this is absolutely amazing. They have fixed the notification shown when upgrading a defense platform. It now only appears when all of the queued upgrades are complete, not once per platform. Gone are the days of upgrading 60 defense platforms and getting 60 notifications spamming your bar. We are finally free of that tyranny. Well done, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the future. Thanks for watching.